Hello, and you are very welcome to this week's episode of Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103. I'm your host, Aisling O'Rourke, and I hope you are safe and well as you tune into the show this week. It's been a very mild and heavy couple of days, so I hope you have had a chance to get out and about. I know it's been very busy for many households who I think are now struggling to come up with ideas as to how to occupy young people over the coming weeks now that the primary school holidays have kicked in full swing. But we might have an idea for you on how to encourage youngsters to enjoy the environment a little bit later on. We'll be catching up with Anna Browne. It's been a while since we've had Anna on the show, so I hope we have an idea for you to keep them occupied the whole way through the summer, if that is in fact possible. But first up on the show this week, there has been a lot of talk in recent days around peat harvesting, and peat harvesting happening at scale across the region. And to tease out exactly what the issue is, I'm joined now by Tom Ryan of the Environmental Protection Agency, and Dr. Ryan is of the Environmental Enforcement section of the EPA. And Tom, you are very welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, Aisling. Very happy to be here.
Now, Tom, for many years, we have been talking about turf cutting and how turf cutting is, in a nutshell, bad for the environment. We know that for many householders, it's their only source of heating or of fuel in their homes, but we know it's an environmental issue. And this new report and this new look on scale at peat harvesting. Can you explain it for us? Talk us through what exactly yourself and your colleagues were looking at.
Yes, so we issued this new report. It's the first of its kind that the EPA has issued that is dedicated to the whole matter of illegal large-scale peat harvesting. And I just say at the very outset, Aisling, that what's in this report and the subject of all of our investigations has absolutely nothing to do with turf cutting or the production of peat for fuel. Absolutely nothing to do with that.
And it does often get confused, Tom, doesn't it?
And that can be very problematic because the EPA has no concerns whatsoever about people exercising what they call their lawful turbary rights. And that is, where they cut turf for their own personal domestic use, providing that turf is not cut on a special area of protection. But they're lawful operations otherwise, and they're not of concern, and they're not the issue of this report here.
So talk us through, because this type of removing peat from the environment, it's happening at scale.
Yes, so over the last couple of years, we have gathered intelligence on 38 operations across 7 counties. And those counties are Offaly, Kildare, Westmeath, Roscommon, Longford, Tipperary and Sligo. And these are where operators are operating without any authorisation from the local authorities. And maybe just to clarify how the authorisations work, it's a little bit complicated. And it's based on the area or footprint on which these operations take place. So, for example, if an operator wanted to legally mill peat from an area greater than 50 hectares, they would require a licence from the Environmental Protection Agency, and they'd also require planning permission from their local authority. Below 50 hectares, they fall out of the direct remit and licensing requirement of the EPA, but they still need planning permission from the local authorities. And all of the sites that we've investigated, none of them have any of those authorisations. And most of the material that's being milled is directly for the export market. And we've estimated, or the Central Statistics Office has provided us with data on that, and annually there is over 300,000 tonnes of this peat being exported, and it's valued at almost €40 million a year. So these are big operations.
They're absolutely massive. tell us, what is this peat? It's being exported in the main, but what is the end product here?
Well, it's primarily for the horticultural sector. For gardening, for hobbyists, for commercial horticulture, and also for the mushroom industry. But as I say, most of this is for the export market.
And when you say export, I'm thinking like, if you're thinking, I don't know, bags of compost or things like that, could we in fact be buying it back in then? It's possible. I don't have the data or information on that. Now, some of this is being put onto the domestic market, of course, but as I say, the vast majority of it is being sent abroad, being exported, and it's to the north, over to Great Britain, across Europe, and then across the world. Quite a wide reach. It's being exported right across the world. And the differentiation when it comes to the permissions that are required, whether it's above 50 hectares or below 50 hectares, why is 50 the key number there? What's the reasoning behind that?
It was a decision in developing the legislation on that. So it was just a policy decision that was incorporated into the legislation. So above 50 hectares was deemed to bring it within the remit of even greater protections that are provided for in planning. And one of the things that we see there, for example, would be Bord na Móna. Bord na Móna operated 9 licenses from the EPA for this kind of activity. So they operated for many, many years lawfully under a license from the Environmental Protection Agency. And they ceased their activities a number of years ago. But their licenses are still operative. And what Bord na Móna are doing now is they're using the license conditions that are now engaged with the rehabilitation and rejuvenation of the peatlands that they previously harvested. Now, while they've harvested away a lot of peat, at least these conditions provide some future protections, and there's an awful lot of work going on in Bord na Móna in that area. Whereas the operators that have no authorisations, no permissions, have no such conditions. And what we've seen across the country is that when operators exhaust these sites, down to the marl in many cases, they just leave behind the exposed marl and large lakes of water and leave them behind, which is, the ultimate in environmental irresponsibility.
The question has to be asked, Tom, how has this been allowed to happen? Because surely this is happening under our noses in many cases.
Yes, it's taking place quietly, going almost unnoticed, in the background of our rural towns and villages. EPA has been very active over the last 10 years in pursuing those larger operators, I should say, operating on greater than 50 hectares. We've prosecuted them in the district court. We have sought injunctions in the High Court, and we've brought a number of these operations, big operations, to a halt as a result of that. But like any illegal enterprise, they've been adapting to our enforcement efforts, and many of them have reduced their operational footprint to below 50 hectares. That takes them out of the direct enforcement remit of the EPA. But they still remain within the enforcement remit of the local authorities. And we have shared all of our enforcement intelligence with the local authorities, including the locations of these sites, the size and nature and scale of the operation, the type of extraction that's taking place there, and aerial photography with the local authorities. And it's our expectation that local authorities would prepare county-wide enforcement plans and site-specific enforcement plans, that they would prioritise their enforcement resources and use the ample enforcement powers that they have to bring these operators to account. Now, that's just not happening at the moment. There's one exception to that in the 7, and that is County Longford, and they're moving in the right direction. They have taken some enforcement actions. They've done some investigations, and they've issued some notices under the Planning Acts. But the response from the rest of the local authorities involved here has been completely inadequate.
What response have you been getting? Like, do we know why local authorities are not following suit on this as the EPA sees it?
Well, what we've been doing, I suppose, with the local authorities, apart from sharing all of this intelligence with them, is we've started to use our own powers under what we call Section 63 of the EPA Act. And that's a provision where the EPA has an oversight role over the environmental enforcement performance of local authorities. So, there's different stages in that provision about giving them advice and all of that sort of thing. But ultimately, we can issue them with notices and directions. And we've invoked some of those provisions. So the current status at the moment is that we've issued all of these local authorities with what we call draft directions to prepare these enforcement plans and to implement them. And the responses that we've been getting from most of the local authorities is, well, 1, we don't have the resources. 2, we don't believe we'd have a whole lot of success here. 3, there's new planning act that, sometime in the future, if another part of it is commenced, there might be a regional enforcement authority, and we should wait until then. The reality is that they have all of the enforcement tools and powers that they need right now to develop and implement those plans, and it's our expectation that they do. And that was reinforced in a court case that we took and was completed in the Court of Appeal last year, where the courts drew attention to the ample enforcement powers under the Planning Act, Section 160, that could be used to good effect in these sorts of circumstances.
It's quite disappointing to hear, and over the coverage of recent days and the conversations that have been happening since you released your report, that it does very much feel like the can is being kicked down on the road in the hope that it'll become somebody else's problem at a later date. But the issue with that is the environment continues to be damaged while nothing is being done about it. Do we need a situation where the EPA is given governance over plots less than 50 hectares until this new enforcement body is created, or until as a temporary measure, perhaps? You could craft all sorts of different regulatory regimes, and there have been attempts in the past to do just that, to take the whole issue of peat harvesting and peat enforcement away from the local authorities, and regulations were developed which ultimately fell for various reasons before the courts. The reality is that the legislation is there. Local authorities have the legal and statutory responsibility to enforce in this area, and they're not doing it. And that's what we're saying. It's our expectation. They are regulatory authorities, they're public bodies, they have legal obligations and responsibilities. They need to step up and take those responsibilities, prioritise their resources, and use, as I say, the ample enforcement powers that they already have at their disposal, and to bring these operators and take them to account. And, at the end of the day, it's the operators that are breaking the law. So our expectation is that they should take note of all of this and stop what they're doing, engage with the local authorities with a view to applying for the authorisations that they need. And if they're above 50 hectares, that would include engaging with the Environmental Protection Agency as well. Is there any consequence on the behalf of the local authority for not taking this action? Like, can they continue to not do anything and just nothing happens? Or is there a higher power at play there on that side of things?
Well, from an EPA perspective, as I said, we've issued them what we call draft directives, directions. So the next logical step, if they remain inactive in this area, would be to formally issue those directions, and it becomes an offence if the local authorities do not comply with those directions. Now, we don't want to do that. We don't think we should have to do that because the roles and responsibilities here are absolutely clear. And that's what I'm saying. We expect the local authorities to step up and take their legal statutory responsibilities as enforcement bodies and do what's required here. But that is the logical outplaying of this.
And then, Tom, there'll be people listening to this particular conversation that we're having now that have perhaps maybe worked in this area in their lives, or even at a smaller scale participated in turf cutting, and it might be part of the family culture, the culture of the community that they live in. And I know that this is not small family householders turf cutting. This is peat harvesting at a manufacturing scale. It's quite a large scale operation. But talk to me about the consequences of this kind of work from an environmental perspective. Like, remind us of the damage that's being done across the Midlands.
Yeah, and just to be absolutely clear, we're talking about this industrial scale activity that's producing peat primarily for the export market. The reality is that this kind of activity operating outside of any regulatory controls is catastrophic for the local environment. It results in the destruction of vital ecosystems for biodiversity. It brings about the loss of those really important carbon sinks, which are so important in our efforts on climate change. And it is it causes the decimation of an irreplaceable cultural and scientific amenity and resource. And every day that it goes on, these irreplaceable ecosystems are being lost. So the time for action is now. This needs to stop. And as I say, operators need to stop, but if they don't, local authorities, and they're not, so local authorities need to step up and take the appropriate enforcement action. EPA will continue to enforce against the bigger players, that's for sure, when and where we detect them and where they appear. But in all of these operations, whether they fall within the jurisdiction of the EPA or not, they all fall within the jurisdictions of the local authorities in terms of planning and the need to take action.
Well, we will watch this space very closely. Dr. Tom Ryan, who is of the enforcement section in the Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for joining us on Let's Go Green.
You're very welcome, Ashley.
You're listening to Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103. Now that we are in the last day of June, it's worth reminding, well, all of us, myself included, that we are smack bang in the middle of the Tidy Towns judging period. Now, we all know people, I'm sure, who are very active in the local community and volunteer their time with the local Tidy Towns committee, whether it's at a small scale in the local village or at a larger effort perhaps in a town or city near you. But there's an awful lot of work goes in, from painting of benches, creating wildlife sanctuaries and wildflower meadows or special areas of biodiversity importance, to litter picking and, encouraging people to just enjoy the area that they live in. So it is something that has been running now for decades and decades, and it's great to see local areas, get their, gold medal or win the national accolade. It's a huge sense of pride, but also for the local economy, it's massive to have a nice area to come and do business in. Let's be honest, a well-minded and cared for town, area, community is much more attractive to visitors and people who to live in even, So this is the ask, and I'm going to make this ask on behalf of every Tidy Towns committee right across the region, okay? please do your bit over the coming weeks. Even if you're not a volunteer with any of these groups or committees, you can make sure you're not dropping litter to begin with at a very basic level, and we shouldn't be doing it anyway. But just keep an eye out, maybe pick up a bit of litter if you're out and about. I saw awful pictures in Tullamore one weekend recently where flower pots that had been worked on and minded by the Tidy Towns Committee in Tullamore were upturned, and the flowers ended up literally in the middle of the street. Now, look, I know people do silly things in the middle of the night when they have drink on them, but I don't get the crack in that one, to be totally honest myself, and it's just disrespectful to the people who've put their time and effort into it. So make an extra effort over the coming weeks, because how it works is over the period of June, July and August, judges from Tidy Towns travel the length and breadth of the country, assessing every area, and they compare the application with what they see on the ground when they arrive. Now, look, there are 550 points available. As one lady, I remember when Abbey Leaks 1 said in the news at the time, you'd nearly need a PhD to fill out the application form these days. It is a complicated process, but basically it comes under 8 separate categories. So the judges are looking at the community, your planning and your involvement in the community, your streetscape and public spaces, green spaces and landscaping in the area, nature and biodiversity in the locality, sustainability, i.e. doing less with more, tidiness and litter control, residential streets and housing areas, approach roads, streets and lanes, so they're all the 8 areas that are being assessed. So it's worth making sure that any areas you have control over are nice and tidy. It's good business, it's good for the environment, it's, you could even say it's good manners to your neighbours, but it also helps, and it's nice to be nice to those who do put in the time and effort and hours. And we see people doing litter picks at the crack of dawn, or sweeping streets, or brushing up that bench in the local park that was getting a bit tired. Tidy Towns groups also, they put in applications for funding for really nice initiatives in local areas. So it's our turn to support them and their efforts at the moment while the judging is taking place, so that at the very least, we're not disrupting their good efforts. And we're not doing ridiculously stupid things, and I am going to say the word stupid on the radio, like upturning flower pots. Some people need to get a life. I'm sorry, but that's just not crack. And I don't care what you claim it is. It's just disrespectful, and it's also just waste of money too, because I'm sure some of those plants had to go, were too badly damaged to go back in the ground. And, we all love to see money being wasted in this country, don't we? So look, keep an eye out. If you see litter, if you see people out doing their bit for the Tidy Towns, maybe, thank them. If you can't do anything yourself, at least say thank you. And let's hope that we see loads of areas across the Midlands getting more medals and more recognition for the hard yards that they put in throughout the year. And let's be frank about it. Going out, doing litter picks and cleaning up areas on a cold, wet, miserable January night, well, there's very few people who are hardworking enough to actually go and put that effort in. I can't claim to be one of those people myself, but I do respect them for doing it. So it would be great to see more towns across the Midlands getting even cleaner and even tidier and even more beautiful, and getting those accolades in the autumn at the National Tidy Towns Awards. So put the extra effort in over the next couple of weeks. It's also a good exercise if you've got youngsters. Can they litter pick? Can they, when they're going out and about, maybe to summer camps, make sure they have a little bag with them for their rubbish? That if they generate rubbish during the day, they're bringing it home to the bin at home to be disposed of correctly. There's so many ways of tackling this, and it's another way of educating youngsters while they're not in the classroom over the summer. After the break, we're going to be talking about saving seeds and how we might have a more beautiful environment without spending all that much money. You're listening to Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103. I hope you've been enjoying the show so far this week. Well, we are joined now by Anna Browne of Big Sky Flowers. Anna, you are very welcome back to Let's Go Green. It's been a while.
Yes, thank you, Aisling. Lovely to be back.
So, Anna, now look, I know the weather has been very up and down, but it is the time of year when we can get out and enjoy our gardens. And for an awful lot of people, the routine is it's summer, so I need to go to the garden centre and I need to buy things and spend money. But that's not always the case. There are other ways of doing things. And I'm kind of thinking that this week is the first week of young kids being on summer holidays from primary school. And oftentimes parents are struggling to know how to occupy their youngsters. And I thought maybe we could teach them a little bit about saving seeds and saving a few euro while they're at it. And who better to talk to us about seed saving? So Anna, what do we need to know? How can we start being a little bit more, creative with how we're creating our gardens?
Yeah, so I suppose, the first thing to say is why it's such a good thing to save seeds, because it's free, obviously. But the plants that you have growing in your garden clearly are able to grow in Westmeath or Offaly or wherever you happen to be. So they've evolved to the locality. And if you get seeds from those plants, they will do better than the seeds that you get in the shop, because those have quite often been saved in Eastern Europe, where the temperature is a lot warmer in the summer, a lot colder in the winter. So you're getting plants that are happily growing in this environment. If you collect seeds from the wild, which you can do as long as you don't take too many, you're preserving genetic diversity. So that's a really good thing to be doing. And they haven't got anything nasty added to them, because you're basically taking them from where they've been growing. And fresh seeds grow better. So one of the things that you might find is, you have a bunch of seed packets that you bought years and years ago, and you try sowing them and it's disappointing. You think, I'm a very bad gardener. But a lot of times seeds don't actually last that long. So like lettuce and carrot and parsnip seeds, the first year you get them, if you're getting them fresh, and you've no guarantee that you are, will grow really well. But after that, they don't do so well. So being able to save your own seeds, you've got the best quality fresh seeds right there. And right now at this point in time, a lot of the plants that would have been biennial, so like, for example, foxgloves and honesty, are going to seed. So, and you can plant them now. And you can, so kind of, in some ways, when the seeds are ready to be saved, they're also ready to plant. So something like foxglove has tiny, tiny, tiny seeds, and you want to wait till they're ripe. So the way you know they're ripe is that they're kind of crispy. So when you shake the plant, you'll kind of hear like a little rattle. Mm-hmm. Same for poppy seeds. And that's the way that you know that they're ripe and ready to save.
And I think it's actually a good bit of fun, because you can, if you're out and about maybe, or you see maybe you're in a friend's house and they have flowers that you love, and you can swap seeds, and if it's not too far away from where you live, so they've got very similar conditions to you.
Yep.
You might not know what you're going to get as well, and it can be a little bit of an adventure.
Oh, it's very exciting. Seeds are exciting just as they are, because this little tiny, tiny thing has all the information it needs to grow into a big plant, and it's got all the energy it needs as well. So they're kind of miraculous seeds. And even how they know when to wake up, like poppy seeds, for example, I always give the example, you'll see poppies growing on the side of the road when there's a new road built, and the NRA didn't plant those seeds. The poppies just grew because they came to the light. So poppies could last for hundreds of years, the seeds in the soil, and until they come to the light, they won't grow. So the fact that seeds know this kind of thing is really, and when you know that as well, you know how to deal with them. So maybe we should talk about storage of those seeds, because it's kind of important once you've saved them that you store them appropriately.
Well, now, okay, so now I have to say, Anna, I follow you on Instagram, and I saw your video there, and I love poppies. I've got a bit of a thing about them, and I was like, oh God, yeah, I'd love to have some poppies in my garden. And they, yours are so vibrant and colourful, but you're right, it's knowing the steps to follow. So first things first, we have to wait for them to be ready to collect the seeds from them. So
yes,
they get maybe, depending on the plant, they get a little bit brown, maybe
yes,
a bit dry. So if we think they're ready, and things like you were saying poppies and foxglove, I know lupin I think is good as well, and allium can be good for that sort of thing as well, kind of easy ones to spot.
Yeah, so the oleums are a little bit tricky and they don't grow that well from seeds. So I wouldn't be going there for a beginner.
Okay. Fair enough.
But for the poppies, they've got those beautiful seed heads. And the way that you know that they're ripe is you look underneath the kind of crown and the little holes come there. So when they're not ripe, no holes. And when they are ripe, the holes, because they're like a little kind of a pepper pot. So look out for those holes on your poppies. And they'll also have gone from green to brown. But the main thing is the holes, because the way the poppies spread around is that they're quite tall and they kind of shake like a pepper pot. They shake their seeds further away. So once you can get them before the seeds are all gone, which, you're going to keep an eye on that as well, you just cut off the heads and cut, a big stalk, because those heads are lovely for a dried flower arrangement later in the year, and hang them upside down somewhere dry. And actually with poppies, hang them inside a paper bag, because you want to catch all the seeds that will fall out. Otherwise, your place will be a mess. So
that's a very good tip, Anna. Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
Okay.
And you want to use a paper bag rather than a plastic bag, because you want it to be able to, air to come around. But one of the things I've found that's the most useful is there's little kind of mesh, you get these mesh polyester bags in vegetable sections of shops. If you wanted to kind of get your veg without using plastic, those are actually perfect for saving seeds, because the mesh is very tiny, the seeds won't escape, but it also lets air come through, and you can wash them, so they're reusable. So those are I would kind of keep them in my car or in my pocket. So I've happened to be, wandering around or on the side of the road or in someone's house, and I see something good, I can whip up one of those bags and put the seeds into it.
Okay, so your poppies are good. What else would you recommend that we keep an eye out for now in the next couple of weeks if we want to?
Foxgloves.
Foxgloves.
So
okay.
If people have been, let the foxglove kind of flowers graduate, they kind of keep blooming until they get to the top, and then you get little kind of balls with seeds in them, and when they've turned brown, they get a bit rattly. They're good. So you would cut off that whole thing, or maybe cut off half of it, and put that into a bag. The other thing to remember, it's very important, is to write the name of the plant on the bag or somewhere, because it's very, I'd be able to look at seeds and say, oh, that's whatever, but most people can't. And write the year as well, because, you might put that away somewhere and find it 5 years later and maybe it's not going to be viable. So when I would, I would put seeds into envelopes, it's kind of those little wage packet envelopes at some point, and I would always make sure to write the name and the year that they were harvested. So that kind of gives me a clue later on as to what they are and when to plant them. So
I have a confession, Anna.
Yeah, you got packet of seeds in the drawer.
No, well, actually, I actually was the photographer for a friend's wedding. And I actually helped her make them the night before. There's a gang of us that went to her mammy's house the night before to make up the favours, and there were sunflower seeds. And I was moving house recently and packing up, and what did I find? Only the sunflower seeds. The thing is, this couple, they've had 3 boys since that wedding happened, and the eldest is now at least 13. So I don't know I'm going to get any life out of the sunflower seeds, but I do still have them. So it's a good tip. In fairness, and I do it myself when I'm batch cooking, and then I take out the Tupperware out of the freezer, and I can't, for love nor money, remember what's in the Tupperware. So we want to label them and we want to date them once we've collected the seeds. So we're waiting for them to get to that kind of browny, crispy, rattly stage. We get them into a paper bag or maybe one of those mesh bags that Anna mentioned. Then what?
Well, then, like I said, the time to plant the seeds is quite often when they're ready. So you could actually plant foxglove seeds now. So you might keep some for, later, but plant some now. So they're biennial. So they go in to get planted now. They form deep roots, and then next year they give you the flowers. So it takes them 2 years to do that. Something like a lupin is more of a perennial. So that could go in now, or it could go in next spring, so March to May. Okay. So it depends on the plant. And I suppose, actually, to mention, if you have plants and you're not sure how to grow them, there's a very good website that's a place where you can buy seeds called Seedaholic, but they have comprehensive information online. So if you ever want to know how do I grow a particular plant, look up that plant on Seedaholic and you will find really good information. And it's an Irish company.
Fantastic. I must look them up because I'm trying to get to grips with having a garden myself at the moment. And actually, I've been doing a lot of relying on ChatGPT. I'm taking pictures of things, going, diagnose this, what have I done, have I killed it? So Seedaholic, another Irish source of information is always great to have. So then, is it like, I suppose with this, Anna, there's a bit of trial and error involved really, isn't there?
Well, given that you have the seeds for free, you can kind of afford to play with it.
True.
So, all you're paying for is the compost. And if it doesn't work out, then you put that into your compost bin and you try again. So really, but in my experience, the ones you save yourselves are the most successful because they're so fresh and ready to grow. So, and they're obviously work in the environment that they've come from. So it quite often is very successful for people. Something like sweet pea, you could take this, with sweet pea, you want to keep picking the sweet peas because if it goes to seed, it'll stop blooming. But maybe when you're tired of the sweet pea blooms, if that ever happens, you can let them go to seed, and then picking those seeds will result in very good germination rates because they're so fresh.
Okay, right, okay. And obviously, okay, you can go to websites like Seedaholic or like I did with ChatGPT, but is there, when you're out and about and maybe you've got kids and you've got them on a walk, maybe in a forest or, in a park, and you see flowers that you think, God, it would be lovely to have some of that at home. I should, just for being responsible and all of that, can we do damage? I know we've given people tips, but could we damage plants when we're out and about if we take seeds from them?
If you take them all, absolutely. So, if you're going on the greenway, there's lots of interesting wild plants growing there. And you might see something like a scabious that you might like. But you want to make sure that it's totally ripe, so you don't take it before it's ripe. And then you just want to take 10%. So you want to leave lots there. So it's not a bad thing to be moving those seeds around and to increase the number of native plants that you're growing. But if you take them all, then obviously there's a problem for next year in that place and in situ there. So, and it's the same with any kind of foraging. You leave more than you take.
And it's about not being greedy, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But it's the kind of thing that with youngsters, they really could learn an awful lot about the environment through doing this as an exercise. Okay, they're not going to get flowers overnight, but it's a great way to teach kids about flowers and where they come from.
It is, and kids really respond to seeds. So when I used to do some work with Educate Together here in Mullingar, and we actually did a seed saving kind of project where we actually sold the seeds then subsequently as a fundraiser. So the kids planted the seeds, they grew the plants, they saved the seeds, they designed the seed packets, they made the seed packets, they weighed them out, and then they offered them. So it was a really nice project to have that had kind of, from start to finish. And for me, in terms of political, awareness, knowing how to save your own seeds is a very political thing to be able to do, because when the big companies dominate all the seeds, you can be very subversive by saving your own seeds.
Fantastic. Now, I know there's an opportunity to learn more about seed saving and the benefits. Anna, tell us what you're up to next weekend.
Yeah, so I'll be speaking at the Yoga Picnic, which is next Saturday the 5th, and I'm doing a seed saving talk. I'll also be giving away seeds. So if you're at the Yoga Picnic, please come by. I'm in the 8 tent first thing in the morning, 10 o'clock. And if you're not at the Yoga Picnic, get tickets now because it's going to be an amazing day. And highly recommend. So the yogapicnic.ie, I think, is the website. And just search for the Yoga Picnic and you'll find it. There's lots of other things going on there apart from seed saving. Lots of yoga, of course, and relaxing things and exercising things and lovely things and things in the lake. Because it's at Loughnennel. So it's a lovely location.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be an absolutely smashing day altogether. And I do hope you get a nice dry day for it, Anna, because,
Yeah, even if we don't, there's good tents and there's good shelter. So we'll be fine.
We're well prepared.
Yes.
Well, Anna Browne of Big Sky Flowers, thank you very much for giving us some tips and tricks on seed saving. If you decide off the back of this to start seed saving, send us in some photos. Keep us an update on what you're at, and especially if you've got kids involved. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure and check out how to contact us on midlands103.com. Anna, it's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks so much, Aisling.
You're listening to Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103, and I hope you have enjoyed our conversations this evening. And again, if you'd like to find out more about what's happening at the Yoga Picnic, check out yogapicnic.ie. And on the EPA's report and the quite frankly, rather disappointing findings that local authorities around the country are not doing enough, according to the EPA, to take control of illegal peat harvesting at an industrial scale. You can check out the EPA's website at epa.ie. Well, It's hard to know what to do with the weather these days. And I know from the extreme heat, if you're heading over to the United States at this time of year, they're experiencing this amazing heat wave there in places that haven't seen temperatures like this in many, many years, or even flooding. I saw awful videos coming in from Paris over the course of the last few days. So do make sure that if you are travelling this summer, that you do a little bit of research as to the weather conditions in the area that you're going in, just so you know what to pack, so that you can, enjoy yourself and be safe, and that you're fully prepared for all of it. And again, like I said to Anna, I hope that you get a dry day for the yoga picnic coming up this coming weekend. Don't forget that Let's Go Green is always inspired by the requests we get in from listeners. So if there's a environmentally friendly hero in your community, if there's a topic that you'd like to hear us discuss and tease out here on the programme, we would only love to hear from you. So if you'd like to suggest an item for the show, or even suggest a person for the show, please do feel free to get in contact with me. There's a couple of different ways that you can do that. First things first, you can go to midlands103.com. You'll find the phone number and all of that there. There's also the on-air team section of the website. Look for my name, Aisling O'Rourke, and you can send me an email from that page. If you happen to have a pen handy, you can send me an email to hello@thecommunicationscoach.ie, or connect with me on LinkedIn at Aisling O'Rourke, or thecommunicationscoach.ie on Instagram. I do pay fairly good attention to my messages. I know sometimes I'm not great at responding to emails, but I promise I do read each and every one. So please do feel free to get in contact with us if you would like to see something featured on the show. And I do want to tease out more of what's happening around the Midlands and all the positive things that are happening. Like, it's great to see in recent days young fashion designers talk about the importance of embedding sustainability and environmentally friendly practices into the fashion industry from the beginning. So, I know, and we talk about this with Pat Kane a lot and other speakers here on the show, that as consumers we can often feel very guilty about what we are doing as individuals. And yes, it can be overwhelming, but really at an industrial scale we need to see all of these industries change their practices to become more sustainable, so that we can all in turn be more sustainable, because there's only so much one person can do, and there's only so many hours in the day. So it's been great, as we see at this time of year, and in many colleges around the country, you have graduate showcases, and, to see all of these youngsters talking about this as being a core part of the kind of work that they want to do in the future. Well, it gives me some hope anyway. So I was delighted to see it during the week. Of course, if you missed any part of this week's episode of Let's Go Green, or indeed another episode of the show, or you just thoroughly enjoyed it and you want to share it with a friend or a family member, don't forget that every single episode is posted as a podcast. It goes on midlands103.com, and also to Spotify and Apple and all the other places that you can find podcasts on. So just search for Let's Go Green with Aisling O'Rourke and you will be sure to find us there. Now, just a reminder about the seed saving piece we did earlier on the show. Anna mentioned a really useful Irish-made website, Seedaholic. So you can go there. Now, you can purchase seeds from it, but you can get loads of information there from Seedaholic if you want to start your seed saving journey, but are unsure as to what to do or where to go about it. And of course, you can always follow Anna on social media at Big Sky Flowers. Anna's videos are always very entertaining and helpful, so be sure to check them out. Now, before I let you go, I wanted to bring you what could be some very positive news. Now, we have discussed ash dieback on the show before, and that's where, if you're not familiar with it, it's a disease that was imported into, well, Europe really, but Ireland in particular, and has spread right across the ash tree population in Ireland, and really has caused, well, devastation, but so many trees quite literally to die back. And it is, for want of a better way of describing it, it's a contagious disease amongst ash trees. And it's, you know, it's part of the reason that Hurleys are not made from ash from Ireland anymore, and all of these awful things. But the BBC had a report over the last couple of days. Now, it's a study that looks at ash dieback because it's really badly affected the UK as well. But there is some scientific evidence to suggest that ash trees themselves are fighting back against ash dieback. Now, 85% of ash trees were predicted to be lost through ash dieback as far back as 2012. But now scientists have discovered that ash woodlands are naturally evolving despite this infection, basically, that they're quite literally adapting. We talk a lot about adapting to new environmental and climate conditions. So the ash woodlands in some parts of the UK appear to be adapting to ash dieback, and it offers some hope that the trees could once again be part of our landscape on a more a broader scale. Like, I know they are beautiful trees and very special trees, and for many farmers in particular that had invested in planting ash forestry, it was a major financial loss. So this new study in the UK, it suggests that there's hope at hand. There has been so much effort into tackling this particular issue. So it is a brilliant news. Now, look, it's early days yet. It's believed that the fungus originated in Asia. It's been in Europe for about 30 years, but again, it's only came into the UK and Ireland in around the 2011-2012 mark. And this study of a particular woodland in the area of Surrey in England has given some hope that the trees might have found a way to grow despite the fungus. So on that hopeful note, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. It's great. You know, it's unfortunate that the trees have had to adapt because of, well, human interaction. But it is great to see that there's some positivity, and we do hope that money keeps getting invested into areas like this so that we can once again have healthy ash woodlands across Europe, but obviously we're looking for them here in Ireland too. So I will leave you on that hopeful note for this week's episode of the show. Have a great week, stay safe, and I'll be back same time next week with another episode of Let's Go Green here on Midlands 103.